Bambu Lab has launched a stripped-down version of its material feeder known as AMS. The new version is called HT and can only feed one material. Why is this a damn good accessory and why you should care? Everything you see in this video I bought myself with my own money. No one has any influence on the content of the video and no one pays me for it. Let's unbox this stripped down miracle. Inside the package is a power cord, 2 double bags of desiccant and a 6-pin data cable. And also the AMS HT. Under the AMS is hidden a quick installation guide. After rescuing the AMS HT from its packaging material, you need to rescue the older accessories from inside the AMS. Inside is a bag containing 3 PTFE tubes. 2 short ones that serve as a spare PTFE tubes for the inside of the AMS. 1 long one that serves to connect the AMS to the printer. Also, there is this tape that informs us of the location of the desiccant bag under this auxiliary shaft. Let's take a closer look at the dryer. The front panel of the dryer only has an information display. This dryer does not have a single mechanical button. It can only be controlled via a Bambu Lab 3D printer, which I will show you during the drying test. The rear panel features an opening for the PTFE tube and a button for releasing it. Inserting and removing the PTFE tube works perfectly. There are 2 data connectors and a power connector at the bottom. There are electromagnetic air valves on the rear panel and bottom of the dryer. These open and close automatically during drying. There is an opening on the back of the top cover through which you can push out elastic or brittle filament. I know what you want to ask and you will find out the answer after testing the filament drying. The dryer is opened and closed using this knob. There is rubber insulation along the top cover to prevent moisture from entering the dryer. The filament inlet is equipped with a ceramic inlet which has a hardness of 1200 units according to the Vickers static hardness test. For us this means that it is more or less indestructible regardless of the filament we use. Next to the filament inlet is a status LED. White indicates that the dryer is functioning normally. Red indicates a problem with the dryer or filament. At the front of the dryer, below the filament, there are openings through which the fan draws air from the dryer chamber. This air is then driven through the heating unit and blown out through openings at the back of the dryer below the filament. This ensures efficient heating of the air inside the dryer through circulation. The dryer has an RFID reader that can read the printing and drying parameters from the inserted Bambu Lab filament spool and transmit the information to the printer. No manual input is required. Just below the filament inlet there is a small button that can be used to release the filament if necessary. Before starting the drying process, I placed 1 set of desiccant bags in the dryer. These needed to be placed under the auxiliary shaft at the rear of the dryer. I tested the AMS HT with the Bambu Lab X1C, which I also bought with my own money. In order to use the filament drying function, the printer asked me to connect the dryer to a power outlet. After connecting the AMS HT to the power outlet, the filament drying option appeared on the printer's display. In this menu, you can select drying parameters based on the type of filament you want to dry. You can also set the temperature and drying time manually. The temperature cannot be set higher than an incredible 85 degrees C and the drying time cannot exceed 24 hours. In the printer menu, you can enable spool rotation during drying for even better drying results. This rotates the spool by 30 degrees every 5 minutes to ensure even drying. Just make sure the filament is not fed in so that it can rotate. After turning on the dryer, the electromagnetic valves are tested and heating with internal air circulation begins. An empty dryer reaches a temperature of 85 degrees C from room temperature within 5 minutes, which is a damn good result. During drying at 85 degrees C, the temperature, according to the dryer, climbed to 87 degrees C. However, these temperatures are measured inside the lower part of the dryer. The temperature in the filament area is slightly lower. Let's see how good this drying really is. For the test, I decided to use an old spool of nylon that had been sitting on my shelf since the last drying. This spool was last used in May of this year to test the drying function of the Bambu Lab AMS HT Pro. And you can find a link to that video here in the upper right corner. Nylon is very sensitive to moisture and absorbs it like a sponge. When heated, water vapor is released from the moist filament, which pushes the filament out of the nozzle. This makes the print fragile and visually very poor quality, as you can see from this print. We will keep this print as a before drying reference for comparison of the drying quality achieved with this dryer. In order to determine how much moisture was removed from this filament spool, I decided to weight it before drying. I used a bearer scale for weighing, which I calibrated before each weighing. Before the first drying, the spool weighed 193.8 grams. Then I turned it on the drying setting for nylon for 12 hours at a temperature of 85 degrees C. After just a few minutes of drying, I could see moisture evaporating inside the dryer. After drying, I weighed the spool again, and this time the scale showed 187.9 grams. This means that AMS HT dried 5.9 grams of moisture from both the filament itself and the paper spool. After drying the filament, I tried printing the test model again. I expected that after 12 hours of drying, there would be almost no difference in print quality. In fact, this was the case with the AMS HT Pro. However, the opposite was true, as you can see. It took only 12 hours and the difference in print quality is like night and day. Since I still saw a few imperfections in the model, I decided to try drying it again, but this time for only 6 hours. Before drying, I weighed the filament spool again and it weighed 186.7 grams. After drying, I weighed the spool again with a result of 186.2 grams. This means that AMS HT dried only 0.5 grams of moisture. To compare the results, I printed the test model again. A total of 18 hours of drying managed to dry this filament almost to perfection. When compared to the version after 12 hours of drying, there is only a slight improvement in print quality. Still, it's an improvement. When I compare the drying results of the same material in AMS HT Pro, it is clear that this dryer really works as a true filament dryer. This nylon was from Gimbert, and I finally had the opportunity to print something with it. In order not to test only this one material, I decided to try drying older materials as well. You can now see a preview of prints from these dried materials on the screen. Thanks to drying, I was able to print materials that I previously had problems with. Most of these problems disappeared after drying, as you can more or less see in most of these prints. AMS HT, like AMS HT Pro, does not allow printing from this device during drying. They also do not allow drying during printing from this device. With AMS HT, it is not even possible to print immediately after drying. This is because the heating unit is located at the bottom of the dryer and the filament is fed directly through this unit. This could cause the filament to melt before it reaches the nozzle. However, there is one big caveat. Do you remember the hole in the top cover? You can pull out the filament that is currently drying through this hole and use it for printing. Simply insert the PTFE tube into this hole and load the filament from the external spool in the printer. The printer will load the filament and will not care where it came from. However, at the beginning of drying, it is necessary to set the spool not to rotate during drying. So you can turn on drying, including rotation, and after a few hours of drying, stop it and start it again. This time, however, without rotation and with the filament fed through the hole in the top cover. As you can see, drying and printing can run simultaneously and the printer has no problem with it. The filament you are drying in this way can also be used for printing on another printer. Simply place the printers close to each other and you can start printing. I was curious to see if I could use this trick with Bambu Lab P1 series printers. So I stopped by a friend's print farm and tried this trick on one of his P1Ps. In the menu, I could only choose one of the preset drying profiles or manually set the temperature and drying time. Before starting the drying process, the printer displayed a message stating that the spool would rotate during drying. There was no option to turn off this spool rotation. In addition to drying, this AMS HT functions as a regular AMS, or rather as a regular filament feeder. When drying for just over 3 hours at a temperature of 87 degrees C, the temperature of the outside of the dryer did not exceed 60 degrees C. I really like that the printer displays a warning when the dryer lid is opened during drying. This is thanks to a magnet in the dryer lid lock and a Hall sensor inside the dryer that detects the presence of the magnet. There is no button on the dryer to turn it on or off. After connecting it to the printer, the dryer remains on and its display stays lit. What bothered me more, however, was the fact that drying can only be activated on the printer display. Drying cannot be activated from Bambu Lab Handy mobile app or the Bambu Studio Slicer. It cannot even be controlled using the Panda Touch display, but this cannot be blamed on Bambu Lab. On the AMS HT website, it says that Bambu Lab A1 and A1 mini printers will also be supported. At the time this video was filmed, AMS HT did not yet support these printers. What to say in conclusion? The AMS HT works perfectly as a filament dryer. Unfortunately, it is a product designed exclusively for Bambu Lab printers and cannot be used separately with other printers. I understand, but I am disappointed. However, if you are looking for a dryer for your Bambu Lab printer, you probably don't need to look any further.